Morning, Calum.
Good morning, Anil.
Well, it's
How are you?
afternoon over there. It's good morning for me. I think it's an
Yeah,
afternoon for you over in Dubai.
afternoon. Yeah, 1 p.m. in Dubai at the moment.
Excellent. I always have to remember, when I'm working different time zones, just to remember which zone you're in.
Yeah, yeah. Get the correct formalities on the email introductions.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll give everybody a few minutes just to start logging in, and then we'll get going. We're looking forward to this session. I wonder where everybody's joining in from. Is everybody in from the UAE, or have we got people joining from all over the globe? Because these days it's a very small world, whether people are actually in the UAE or whether they're going to be coming in from other parts of the world.
I see we've got a few people from Dubai, UAE, some from UK joining from the chat.
Well, excellent. I think there's a lot of eyes on the UAE at the moment, so there's definitely going to be people interested in setting up businesses. We got somebody, hey Anish, from India. Boris, nice to have you on board from the UK. Mohammed, nice to see you here from Dubai. Hi, Melissa. You're in Dubai as well. I definitely think there's going to be interest from people that are already outside of UAE. There's certainly loads of activity in starting up businesses in UAE at the moment. I think we're 3 minutes in. Shall we get started, Callum?
Yeah, sure. Let's go.
All right, perfect. Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are around the world. Thanks for joining this session. It's myself, Annil Chandel, and Calum McLatchie. We're running this session, setting up a business in UAE. I'm going to do a quick introduction for you all, and then I will do an introduction for myself, and then Calum, and then we'll just dive straight in to the session. We're going to keep it fairly open. There's no presentations. We wanted to keep it very interactive, so feel free drop your questions as we're going along into the chat. We will try to answer them either in flight as we're going along, or we try to keep it right to the end if we're having some interesting conversations that take a bit more time. So welcome to our first webinar in our business development series, understanding how to build and operate a business in the UAE. In this webinar, we'll be discussing the specifics on business setup and infrastructure in UAE, advised by Calum McLatchie from Creative Zone, who is the business setup team lead, specializing in setups across UAE, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. Just a quick introduction of myself. My name is Annil Chandel. I'm the Regional Managing Director with RE, based at our HQ out of London, looking after Middle East and India. I've worked with MNCs, around the world. I've also advised small businesses in various different countries, launched my own business in various sectors, so had the entrepreneurial opportunity in my life as well. And I have set up on both sides on the fence where, as an entrepreneur, raising capital, for a couple of businesses that I've been involved in, as well as an investor. I work with Recruitment Entrepreneur, which is the #1 global investor to build, scale, and create wealth in recruitment business with a group revenue of over 250 million US dollars. We have a headcount in excess of 500 and growing, and we operate in multiple industry sectors and have a global presence. In fact, we're doing business in over 60 countries. So I think this is a really good conversation, for the UAE. Because I've certainly noticed over the last couple of years, a number of new businesses opening up in UAE is quite phenomenal. Welcome to this session, Callum. It's really great to have you on here. I'm looking forward to this session because I'm sure I'll take away a few things where I'm learning from you as well. But why don't you give an introduction of yourself and Creative Zone, and then we'll get cracking into the Q&A.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you very much for having me on, Anil. Yeah, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, depending on where you are. So my name is Calum, as Anil has introduced me. So I'm the business setup team leader at Creative Zone. I'm originally from the UK, but I've been living in Dubai for the last 7 years. This is my 8th year in Dubai and working in Creative Zone for 3 or 4 years in the business setup industry. So Creative Zone, we're the leading business setup agency in the UAE. We've been operating since 2010. I mean, we have about 200 employees under our creator zone, and then within the larger group itself at creator zone, about 500 employees. So quite a large organization for business setup. And we're a full turnkey service, corporate service provider. So our main sort of bread and butter is the company registration with multiple different jurisdictions. And of course, the residency visa, the bank account, tax and accounting. So everything you need to have a well-established, legal, legitimate business here in the UAE.
Thanks, Calum. That's really good to know. I mean, I've read a lot, and we obviously work with Creative Zones, so I've seen the work firsthand when I've been over in Dubai. I'm always interested when I'm speaking to somebody and doing one of these sessions, just to hear maybe two snippets of your journey and how you ended up in the UAE. So I think that's quite an interesting, sort of link to what
Yeah.
you've ended up, doing there.
Yeah, of course. So as I mentioned, originally from UK. I mean, I graduated, my background's law, so I graduated from Newcastle University in law, moved to London, was actually doing real estate in London, funnily enough, moved over to Dubai for the potential and the opportunities in real estate. So that's what initially got me over here. So I spent the first couple of years and then kind of found my feet over the last sort of 5 years in the business setup industry. So I was previously working for one of the government jurisdictions directly, and then moved over to Creative Zone as a more as a consultancy. So we can work with multiple different options for our clients. So that's kind of what intrigued me over. I mean, the opportunities in Dubai. I had a few friends over here which were very successful in the real estate industry. So I decided to make the move. I hadn't actually been to Dubai before I moved over, never visited the country. So just got a one-way ticket and never looked back.
Wow, that's quite a feat, right? And I think
Yeah.
nowadays it's pretty common. I think there's a lot of movement globally because the world just becomes a lot smaller. So you're absolutely right. I think it's a leap of faith. When you haven't been to a country, and you take that leap of faith. And we were just discussing, I think, just before the session, what Dubai was, back when I first landed up there, which was the early '90s, and even the change and the development that's happened over the last decade, is quite phenomenal. I was reading a snippet in the first half of 2023. There was 30,000 new businesses, registered in the first half of 2023 in the UAE. So
Yep.
quite a phenomenal number considering the UAE as a country, as a sort of a location is still quite a relatively small one compared to other big countries around the world. Thanks for that bit of background. We'll dive straight in. This is the session about setting up in the UAE. So I guess the first question, which obviously comes to a lot of people's minds when they're looking at setting up, what are the primary business entity options for setting up a business in the UAE, and how do they differ in legal structure and requirements?
Yeah, of course. I mean, so for people who are not familiar with the UAE, there are 7 different emirates. Obviously, Dubai is probably the most recognized, is the main sort of commercial hub of the UAE. And then you have its capital, Abu Dhabi, and then you have the Northern Emirates as well, Ajman, Ras Al Khaimah, Sharjah, Al Quwain, Fujairah as well. So across the 7 emirates, you have multiple different jurisdictions for company setup. There are effectively 2 main type of jurisdictions you can go for, or 2 main types of setup. You have what's called a mainland registration, which is issued under the DED, which is the Department of Economic Development. The mainland is kind of the more like a consultancy like Creative Zone can come and help you and advise you and guide you on what would be more suitable. But with free zones, they're all governed by the same legislation. So it doesn't matter whether you're based in Abu Dhabi, Ras Al Khaimah, Dubai, how you operate as a business is exactly the same. It's governed by the same regulations under a free zone. Depending on what sort of activity you're doing, for example, if you're trading goods from a free zone inside the local market, then you need to hire a local distributor to deliver the goods. So there will be certain regulations put in place from a free zone, but you can work within the free zone itself with any other free zone directly and internationally. But there are certain restrictions depending on the type of service you're offering when entering the local UAE market. And that would be the major difference between the two types of setup.
I mean, that's really, I mean, it's really interesting to know the different emirates. I would assume that Dubai is by far the biggest and probably the one that's chosen the most by people coming into, the UAE. Is that true, or would you
Yeah, no,
say one of the?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, I mean, operational, it doesn't make a difference where your license is issued from. They're all government authorities providing you a trade license legally.
Hmm.
So Dubai is more of a personal preference, if you will. Unless you need a specific location, if you want your office, for example, in a Dubai location, you need to be registered under one of the Dubai authorities. But a lot of the jurisdictions will provide virtual concepts, so you can effectively be based anywhere and work remotely. But yeah, it's Dubai is definitely the most favorable option because it has the more internationally recognized, prestigious sort of feel to it, if you will.
Hmm. From your experience in setting up, entities for people who want to start businesses, how easy, would it be for somebody to actually set up on their own? Because people from the UK, like you and I, and some of the people on this session, can easily set up a business online in the UK, and you don't really need any specialists to support you on that. So,
Right.
how is it possible? Number one, and what would your advice be to anybody setting up or starting to launch in the market?
Yeah, it is really simple and they're making it more and more easier as well. So even in my time over the past sort of 5 years I've been in this industry, I've seen drastic changes to make it more accommodating towards people investing, foreign investors into the country. So it is very simple to register a trade license. It's effectively a three-stage process. So the first stage would be applying for your trade license from the government authority. And most of this, it's hard to sort of discuss across all of the jurisdictions and generalize, but the majority of them you can get your license remotely. So physical presence is not even required for a lot of the free zones, especially. Mainland, you might have to be physically here for the notary signing, but the majority of jurisdictions now you can complete your license online remotely, which is great. Then stage two would be applying for your residency visa. So this is where physical presence would be required in the UAE. So you need to come to the UAE, you do a medical examination, which is very common for all visas. You do a medical test, you get your bloods taken, you'll do an X-ray, and you'll do your biometrics for your Emirates ID as well. Then finally, the last stage would be sort of banking and account opening, which may or may not require a physical presence again, depending on which sort of option you select for. But it's just a simple case of you'll pay a fee, there will be a licensing cost, an annual renewal. As long as you pay that and you have all the correct licensing, it's very simple to set up these days.
That's quite interesting because there's obviously, I mean, the three parts: the setup of the entity, and then your residency, and then you would do your bank accounts. Or if you set up an entity, you could do bank accounts even without residency.
So we're seeing that banks will only accept applications with the residency visa these days. So license comes first, then the license will allow you to apply for the residency visa and Emirates ID. And then having that structure will allow you to go on to open up a corporate bank account. So you do need a residency visa and Emirates ID for the corporate bank account and personal bank accounts now.
Great. I just had a question which has actually popped up. I think is relevant to this section, so I'd love to just bring that. Melissa, you've just shared a question. I have had a lot of KYC checks in a free zone set up. How lengthy or restrictive is this normally?
Yes. So, I mean, the onboarding process and general KYC and compliance, they are getting a little bit more strict. But this is to improve the overall reputation of UAE in general, I believe, because they want to be more compliant with the rest of the world's regulations and they want to become an internationally recognized hub for business in general.
Mhm.
So, yes, there might be additional KYCs initially in compliance, but standard sort of background checks, proof of residency, your personal documentation, passport copies, etc. Um, Source of wealth, you might need to provide where your income or salary certificates for compliance checks. So yes, there might be additional checks initially for the registration, but once you're incorporated, it's just a case of a simple annual renewal cost.
Great. How long does it take to actually go through the process of incorporating? Because different countries have different timelines.
Yeah, of course. So again, it's difficult to generalize across everything, but generally speaking, for a free zone setup, you'd be looking to get a trade license within about 1 week
Okay.
on average. So this is after we do all the necessary onboarding, compliance checks, preparing your documents, etc. You can get your trade license within about 3 to 5 working days. So relatively quick. Then the next stage, there'll be certain bits in between, but you need to open like your immigration file, e-channel if you're in the Northern Emirates or Abu Dhabi, which is an online government portal to monitor all your visa applications. Then you can apply for your residency visa. Residency visa, again, physical presence is required. And this can take anywhere between sort of 2 to 3 weeks. So you need to plan accordingly to stay in Dubai for that duration. You can expedite that process through VIP services. So you can
Mhm.
reduce that sort of best case scenario for that, maybe about 7, 8 working days for your visa. And then finally, the banking, depending on which bank you want, maybe a few days for a digital bank account, or maybe 2 to 4 weeks to 6 weeks, depending on the complexity of the application. So overall, you're looking maybe about 6 weeks to be fully operational.
Excellent.
Six
Um,
weeks.
Great. Thanks, Callum. And what about the branch setup of overseas entities too? Because obviously, what you've described is about setting up a physical business, entity there. Is this the same as a local entity setup, or is it different when you're setting up as a branch?
Yeah, so you can have international branches. So if you're a corporate shareholder, that's absolutely fine. If you are establishing a foreign entity as a branch or a subsidiary, all you need to do is provide the attested documents from the parent company. So this does have additional costs and different timelines. So you need to attest the corporate documents. So trade license, for example, articles of association, share certificates or certificate of incumbencies from the parent company. They need to typically be attested in the embassy, the UAE embassy in the home country, then further attested by Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in the UAE, and then you go through that licensing process to register your company. But it's absolutely fine to register foreign entities as a branch or subsidiary, or even local entities as branches or subsidiaries, or individual shareholders. You can have multiple individual shareholders in that structure as well.
Okay. I guess one of the key questions that often people will have in their mind is, how does the infrastructure in the UAE support business operations and growth, particularly for new ventures?
Yes, I mean the UAE in general. I see it since my time being here. They're ever adaptive. They're always trying to accommodate towards foreign expatriates. I mean, the majority, 90% of the population is foreign expatriates, so they want to attract foreign investment. So there are lots of incentives. There's always new promotions for new startups, so discounted rates. Some amazing packages if you're looking to invest long term. You could get discounted rates for up to a 10-year license in some circumstances from different jurisdictions. So there's always ongoing incentives to try and attract the sort of best talent or initiatives or ideas or businesses to the UAE. You can also get, if you do have a specific idea or a particular innovative idea, you could get sponsorship from certain government entities as well. You can approach them if you have a really fantastic idea. I'm sure they'll be willing to meet you and discuss with you and potentially invest, or you could go down the private investment options as well. So there's several different availability options here.
I think you make a very good point there. Often when you're setting up in a new location, uh, yeah, looking at a partner, to support, always helps, whether that's a financial partner, whether it's an operational support partner, whether it be guidance and advice partner. I think it's always good to look at that option because it certainly helps you when you're going into anywhere new. And knowing a country like Dubai, and the changes that have happened very quickly over the last few years, I think that's super important. So thanks for sharing that. I've got a couple of questions there which have popped up around, the setup. They're more specifically orientated around licenses. So Mohammed's asked a question: is there any e-commerce license for online work?
Yep, of course. So e-commerce is actually a very popular license. I think there's been a relatively large boom recently in sort of drop shipping, online selling. So yeah, it's again a relatively easy business to establish. We can go for any particular free zone. Since it's online, we could stick towards a free zone jurisdiction, because with free zones, you can work remotely anywhere, and typically you might use a local distributor if you're trading inside the UAE anyway. So some of the Northern Emirates in particular have some amazing pricing for e-commerce, and it is very simple to set up. Again, just register the license with the e-commerce activity, then you get a residency visa and then your bank account, and you can work with, for example, Amazon online, or Noon, which is a local sort of very similar platform like Amazon, or any of the major sort of e-commerce websites. You can register your license under there.
And what about recruitment businesses? Because Anish has asked a similar question around, licensing for recruitment businesses.
Yep. Again, very easy to register. So if you're doing recruitment in Dubai, we could either look towards a mainland license. They have an activity. They don't have a specific recruitment activity as such, but they have HR consultancy. So you could, if you want an office and get what's called an Ajari or a tenancy contract for your own office, then you need to go for a mainland option. But again, you could have a free zone jurisdiction for recruitment. You'll see a lot of the major recruiters in UAE actually will probably have a free zone license. So it is widely accepted that recruitment itself can be done on any of the free zone jurisdictions, depending on your requirements. So again, if you need an office in Media City in Dubai, or a particular location in JLT, for example, or downtown, depending on your requirements, will depend on the jurisdiction to decide. But again, relatively easy and straightforward to set up. On all the trade licenses, you'll mention the specific activity that the scope of services you're providing. So during the registration, we can help you clarify which one's more suitable for your business, but you can select on your license your activity, and that'll be your business effectively.
That's useful information. I guess, look, one of the burning questions is going to be Dubai is a relatively high cost location, to be based at, as much as taxation, is a big benefit, to be based out of Dubai. What are the typical sort of costs associated with setting up and operating a business in UAE, including things like registration fee, office space, licensing? What would be the expenditure that would be required, to set up?
Yeah, so the minimum sort of package that you'll require will be, of course, your constitutional documentation. So typically your trade license, articles of association or memorandum of association, which is all included in the incorporation costs. Usually you'll get what's called a virtual desk or a flexi desk. If you need a physical location, you can pay for that separately. So that would be an additional cost. Then you have your residency visa costs, and then bank account. That's the sort of minimum setup. So you'll have the registration costs, and then you'll have a recurring annual fee from the government as well. Now, the pricing, there's, as I mentioned, over 50 different free zones. Just to give you some sort of idea of pricing, some of the packages for a basic setup can start from around about 15,000 dirhams, all inclusive with your license, your visa, bank account opening. So everything will be included in that package. That's the sort of starting at the lower end, if you will. This is from one of the Northern Emirates. If you come to Dubai, Dubai does tend to be a little bit more expensive because you're paying for a more premium location. So depending on the jurisdiction and depending on your requirements, it can go into 100,000, depending on your office facilities or warehouse facilities, etc. as well. I'm sure everyone is aware and has seen recently in the media the new tax implications that have been added to the UAE as well. So this will be another cost for your running your business as well. So as of 1st of June last year, tax was added. There's effectively two tax brackets. Anything below 100,000 US dollars profits is 0% corporate tax. Anything above 100,000 US dollars, you'll be taxed 9% on the net profits above 100,000 US dollars. So you do need to keep your bookkeeping, your accounts, balance sheets, and you'll need to submit annual audits for all registrations now as well. So that will be another cost for your business.
Yeah, thanks for that. That was going to be my next question around taxation because there has been some recent changes, and I guess just a side question on taxation. How do you see, in your experience and working in that localized market, how do you see this changing? Are we now moving more towards taxation being increased and introduced across, the Emirates, or do you think this is probably, the first slab and the last slab that they will introduce? So it's more of a personal opinion of yours rather than
Yeah.
what the legislation is saying right now.
Well, let's hope it's certainly the last slab that they introduce. Because, I mean, everyone moves to the UAE. The whole attraction is that it's a tax-free economy. So that's the main draw and why people want to move here and invest here. So personal income tax is completely tax-free. So any salary, any dividends, any income personally is completely tax-free. So they've even confirmed that they will not be introducing any personal income tax as per their recent media announcements. So regarding corporate tax, in terms of a business setup, in my personal opinion and what I've seen, there's been no decrease for company registrations. So it doesn't seem to deter any sort of people or companies at the moment in terms of investment. Again, I think it's more of a sort of a reputational thing. I think it's so they're more internationally can be recognized as a leading global hub. And yes, there might be 9% corporate tax, but it's more so they can have that reputation. So people have to keep the bookkeeping, and they've introduced things like anti-money laundering, economic substance requirements. So all to improve their overall reputation globally. And I think it's more to do with that rather than let's start charging people 9% corporate tax to try and bring in more taxation. I think it's an overall reputational thing. That's my personal view.
Yeah, I for one are quite keen to hear about how that will change because certainly most of the world has gone to higher taxation. It'd be interesting to see as that changes. But I agree with you. I think it's very attractive for bringing investment into the country, as well as the wider sort of Middle East, where there's a lot of activities going on, and with growth and modernization and welcoming people and their businesses there. Whilst we're still on the topic of costs and money, there's a couple of questions that have popped up. Grazila, sorry, apologies if I've said your name wrong. Has asked a question. Government funding for international projects, i.e., for someone who wants to start a business in Dubai, and if so, what requirements and qualifications would be required to submit an application? I'm not sure if this is a topic that you may, because funding and government funding is usually quite a big topic in its own. But if you have any experience around that, and Anish has asked a very similar question: is there any special funding schemes by government for startups?
Yes, so it's not something where we're the experts in. We don't necessarily assist with government funding as such. We can help with the licensing side of things. So we always give a free consultation for depending on your requirements. So going on to your question, is there any specific qualifications? It depends on the activity. So for example, if you're an architect or a lawyer, you'll need to provide attested qualifications in that field. But if you're working sort of the average sort of media companies without qualifications or social media services or digital marketing, they don't necessarily need any particular qualifications. You can simply just set up a trade license and then you can operate your business. But in terms of the government funding, we're not necessarily the correct company to advise you on this, but there's certainly a lot of options out there. I do know that a lot of the government entities, again, you can potentially approach them directly, but there is a lot of initiatives if you do have those really innovative ideas, and you're bringing a great concept to the Middle East, they'll definitely assist.
I mean, just to add from our experience, I mean, typically we have found that, there are, when a country is growing as fast as the UAE, you tend to find that there's a lot of accelerator programs or incubator programs, some which are government supported, not necessarily government led. However, there's lots of inbound investment. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we, as recruitment entrepreneur, have looked at the UAE, and we're actively funding businesses in the recruitment space, to grow there, because we just see it, one, as a very fast growth market, the opportunities across multiple sectors. So investors typically would look at regions like the UAE very closely, because funding is a big part of actually growth and scale and ultimately creating wealth in your businesses. So it's a very good point, but I agree with you, Callum. I don't think this is probably the forum, for that piece, about government funding. There's a lot of private funding and there's a lot of angel investors, as well as larger scale Series A, Series B, Series C, VCs that are looking at the UAE, as a major place for growth. A lot because of the Middle East as a whole, because Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is going through some massive growth right now, which is needed, for it to become essentially the 10 times bigger brother of the Emirates, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So just moving along, I think we'll park the government funding. Melissa's asked a question. Also, a lot of private funding, if you look for it. Network is important. I totally agree with you, Melissa. I think you need to reach out to your wider networks, because if you've got a great idea of a business that you're wanting to launch, finding money and investment is usually relatively easy. But you just need to ensure you're structuring your proposition clearly and effectively with a plan, and you have industry knowledge and experience to have to execute something like that in country, rather than just picking a fad and saying, well, real estate is doing fantastically well there, let me get into real estate. The hospitality trade is doing fantastically well, let me get into there. You should avoid sectors that you don't really have the industry knowledge and experience in, because it's way harder to actually build a business that's going to be successful, in that way. So one of the next questions, which I think is something which I've seen, over the 2 decades that I've been involved with Dubai, is the changes in the legal and regulatory considerations. One of them you touched on, which was around ownership of that entity, because typically you had to have a 51% stakeholder from a local Emirati, which I know has somewhat changed. But what are the legal and regulatory considerations that entrepreneurs need to be aware of when starting a business in the UAE?
Yeah, so I mean, we touched them on earlier in the conversation, but we can go over them again. So it's mainly the mainland. So the mainland, as I mentioned, there's no restrictions on how you can operate. You're free to work with whoever you want, wherever you want, inside the UAE, outside the UAE. And the legislation has changed now that you can have 100% foreign ownership for this type of structure as well, for the majority of those activities. So previously, yes, you had to have a 51% local Emirati sponsor, but that's all been removed. So it's they're ever forward thinking and adapting towards foreign expatriates, investors, to make it even more and more as simple as possible for them. Then you have the regulations of the free zone, which we touched upon. So, for example, if you're operating from a free zone, you can work within that free zone directly with any other free zone in the UAE directly. You can work internationally without any restrictions whatsoever. The only regulations come from a free zone when you're operating inside the local market. So, for example, if you're a trading business, if you're trading commodities, you need to hire a local distributor to deliver the goods. So you can still trade the goods, but it's the delivery aspect. So you need to hire a logistics, courier, or delivery company to deliver the goods. If you're a service-based company, it's widely accepted that you can work with a local agent. Now, what is a local agent? A local agent is a registered mainland private company. So you can effectively do business to business. You should not do B2C from a free zone. So if you're an interior designer, let's say, you shouldn't go to a residential villa and give your services from a free zone as an interior designer to the end user. That's not permitted. That's against the regulations. And free zones as well, typically government entities will not work with free zone companies. So again, if you're working with government entities, you need to be registered as a mainland DED license. So, and then once you've kept your annual renewal fee, that's the regulations. And then with the recent tax legislation added as well, those are the main sort of regulations to keep your business operating completely legally and have everything running smoothly.
Thanks, Calum. I think it's a really important part of setting up in the UAE. You've got to get it right, and having somebody like yourselves, really helps because you guys have seen it, understand it. You've done it multiple times, which probably leads to my question: in your experience as Creative Zone, what's the common challenges entrepreneurs, face during the business setup process, in the UAE, and how can they be addressed or overcome?
Yep. So I would definitely say the main challenge is banking. So banking can be the most tedious, difficult part of this process because just because you've got a license and a residency visa does not mean you're guaranteed a bank account, unfortunately. So this is where a consultancy like Creative Zone can step in and we will advise you of the correct structure to begin with. So we have the experience knowing which activities are high risk, which activities are low risk, which activities are preferred by the banks. So I would highly recommend speaking with Creative Zone as an advisory firm. Depending on your requirements, we can decide which jurisdiction is best for you, which activities are more suitable for your license to make it a relatively low risk activity and application. So we'll advise you from the very beginning to get everything set up right. So we'll issue your trade license with the correct activities on it, which we know are more favorable towards banks. Then we also have a fantastic banking department at Creative Zone as well, with strong connections with the local banks and experience and the knowledge of which ones would be more suitable for your business and a higher chance of approvals as well. So I would definitely say that's the main challenge. Other than that, you have the sort of other tedious applicate throughout the applications, such as physical presence required so you need to plan to stay for a couple of week period to do your residency visa. But once you're set up, once you've done this, all you need to do is visit once every 6 months to keep your visa valid and pay the annual renewal costs, and then you can operate remotely. You don't have to stay for any specific period of time in UAE to keep your business. Only visit once every 6 months to keep your visa valid. Make sure you pay the annual renewal costs, and you're free to work remotely.
Excellent. No, I think that's really good advice. I mean, I think in summary, the key things are ensure you've done your research, speak to an expert, rather than trying to navigate the minefield of different types of entities, different types of setups, whether you would choose to have a certain type of licensing. I think, if you get the right bit of advice, and I know Creative Zone have done this thousands of times, for businesses and supported them and successfully set them up, it makes sense to advise with a partner, to ensure you get it right, first time. Otherwise, typically, you're going to have a challenge setting up and launching a business and making sure it's operationally and profitable over a short period of time. You just don't want to get it wrong when you're doing the setup. So the foundations of how you operate and set up in country are really super important. I mean, I just wanted to share, a couple of points, from a recruitment entrepreneur perspective, that we've learned over time. When you're launching a business, it's not necessarily specifically just to the UAE, but it will apply to the UAE. So many learns that we've had over the last decade or so when we've invested in early stage and growth businesses. First and foremost, like anything, you got to have the leap of faith. A bit like the leap of faith, Callum, you've taken when you've moved countries, to go and do something new. You've got to have that leap of faith and have support from your friends and family, because it's really important, because an entrepreneur's journey often is a lonely and very tough, journey. So have that support and make sure you've got, that faith behind you to ensure you're going to execute. Business idea, of course, you need a business idea. Do your research. Make sure you tee it up properly. Got a supporting business plan, which is not just purely a commentary business plan, but a financial plan is super important. So you know what your finances look like. Capital, either back it yourself if you've got money, or find the right investor, to work with you. But capital, put a 6 or 12 month plan where you can sustain your business for that period of time, because it would probably take at least that amount of time to set up. Just make sure you don't have any operating restrictions. What do I mean by that? No restrictive covenants. You can operate in the country. Your ex-employer is not going to stop you from working in the same space. Make sure you've done a bit of due diligence there. And networking and connections. This is probably the biggest learn for any entrepreneur, is make sure you are leveraging your network and your connections to get yourself off to a really good start once you have launched. A really important piece, which a lot of founders tend to forget, is the infrastructure, the back office. Who does your HR? Who does your legal? Who does your financial? Who does your accounting? Who does your systems and operations? All these things we tend to forget when you're setting up a business. It's really important to ensure you've either got a partner or you've thought through that, because your time will get sucked away very, very quickly, setting up systems, processes, regulations, agreements, and so on and so forth. So make sure you've got that. A really key learn is whether you choose to partner with somebody. And there's various different types of partners: financial partners, business partners that could help you, with a skill or an ability which you maybe not have yourself. But doing something with a partner is often easier. There's less risk, and you potentially have a much faster growth, when you're building something. So always consider whether you go it alone as a solopreneur, or whether you bring in a partner as a co-founder, or whether you bring in a partner to support you with back office or finance or something like that. And it's a journey, learn and evolve. Don't leave it in a silo that you believed it's never going to change. You need to continually adapt, to adapt to market changes, adapt to regulations, adapt to your industry sector changing. So there's lots of different things that you have to be on top of, and just make sure you're evolving your business until you get that really sweet spot of a business which is going to grow fantastically. And adapt. Melissa just said, adapt to new taxes. Yes, you're absolutely right. I think that's a really key point, because the landscape is going to change. When or if, I don't think we know, but that is realistic. Don't just move to Dubai or the Emirates just because it's 0% tax and it's a great sunny location. Think about the implications of building a business and the longevity of it, because you want to be creating something of wealth. Handing back over to you, Calum, just a quick summary, if you want to give any bits of advice before we wrap up the session. I think it's been super useful, certainly from my perspective, but any last words, from you before we wrap up the session?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you just said is fantastic advice, and I completely agree. So have a strategy in place that can start with your business idea. Come and speak to Creator Zone. We provide a free consultation, so we can give you all the sort of advice in terms of how to structure your business correctly with the correct activities. We'll give you all the pricing, so you can then begin sort of forecasting long term how much it's going to cost for you to have a registered business in the UAE. And I think one of the main sort of advantages in the UAE is it's a lot of network. So it's about who you know a lot of the time. So if you do have strong contacts, use them. There could be potential investors. I think Dubai and UAE has one of the highest per capitas of millionaires, multimillionaires. So there's lots of private investors out there who I'm sure will be more than willing to invest into sort of great ideas. So have that strategy in place. Come and speak to the experts to give the correct advice on your corporate structuring, and then just make sure. I mean, I'm personally going through. I've started a little sort of side hustle myself with one of my friends, so I've got that sort of relatively new experience of being an entrepreneur. So it's an experience. It's a learning curve. It's probably going to cost more than you'd expect, but it's great. It's whatever happens, it's not potentially breaking the bank, but it's a great opportunity to learn new skills, new marketing opportunities, networking. So it's a real good opportunity in the UAE, and it's other than just the business setup side of things. If you are looking to relocate here, it's an amazing place to live. It's one of the safest places I've ever been in the world. I don't see myself moving anytime soon. I've been here for 7, 8 years, so it's a really fantastic little bubble, let's say.
That's a great testament. You're definitely a poster boy for the Emirates and specifically Dubai. So yeah, I think you summarised that really well. Look, I'd love to connect up. I know there's going to be a bunch of other questions, and there's loads of other questions that I'm sure will come out of this session. Feel free to connect up. I'd love to connect up with everybody on this session and anybody else that listens in on this post this. But I'm really personally quite excited about what's happening, in the UAE. I've been spending quite a lot of time, working with our partners in Dubai. We've already invested in a couple of recruitment businesses in that region. As much as there are challenges, like every region, I think the benefits and the beauty of operating in that region with the growth that's going on and is seeing this huge spurt of growth right now. I'm really quite excited to see where this is going. So I'd love to connect up with you all. Feel free. Our LinkedIn profiles for both Callum and myself are been dropped into the chat. Looking forward to connecting up. Thank you very much for taking the time out to seeing us today and listening in. We're available for any questions you may have post this, so feel free to message us on LinkedIn or drop us a line. Have a great day, have a great afternoon, have a great morning, and we look forward to inviting you to the next session, which I'm sure will be coming in the next month or so.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. It's been good having been here. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye for now.